In this video, we will be playing Uncompromising Mode with the highest health config settings for every boss. This means that not only are the bosses enriched with deadlier attacks, but they are also significantly tankier, making them extremely challenging to face alone. Because of this, I brought together 3 other Uncompromising Mode veterans to help me defeat every single boss in the game, since it would be really boring to do it by myself. Before we get started though, we need to first establish some ground rules. Number 1, Wolfgang will be banned because his 2x damage multiplier kinda defeats the whole purpose of this challenge. Number 2, duplicate characters will not be allowed. The point of this rule is to keep our team composition as diverse as possible and to make this challenge more fun. Number 3, there will be no character swapping of any kind, which means once we've picked our characters, there is no going back. Lastly, there will be no rollbacks, which means that whenever something goes wrong, we will be forced to deal with the consequences. I will be playing Wanda throughout this video, and my allies will be Warley, Winona, and Wormwood. Every one of these characters have been tweaked in Uncompromising Mode, and we will cover them all later on. For now, take a seat and get comfortable, because today we will be playing through the entirety of Uncompromising Mode and fighting every single boss the game has to offer. Here is a quick recap on all the rules, and listed on the screen is every server mod we played with. So the 4 of us loaded in, and we quickly got to work. We all wandered off in different directions, with one goal in mind: find a good base location. On the first day, I stumbled across a very weird set piece. Uncompromising Mode adds many new set pieces to the game, and this is one of them. It's pretty weird to see Lunar Island stuff right here on the mainland, but it doesn't really benefit us that much. Besides that weird set piece, day 1 was about as normal as you'd expect. Right before the day ended though, Paper found a very special biome that Dizzy was looking for. This is the Hooded Forest, a beautiful Uncompromising Mode exclusive biome, filled to the brim with tons of unique content. With the Hooded Forest located, Dizzy befriended some pigs and quickly got to work. These giant trees are known as redwood trees, and it takes 25 swings with an axe to chop. As you damage them, they drop goodies all around you. You can get logs, twigs, eggs, and even feathers by doing this, and it's honestly pretty worth it. Just make sure to watch out, because items that land on your head will deal 20 damage to you. Thanks to Dizzy's efforts, we now had a surplus of logs available, which meant it was now time to decide on a base location. On the 4th day, we decided on basing in the Pig King biome because it had several very good wormholes nearby and easy access to many other points of interest. Now that we have the base location figured out, it's time to begin preparations for the very first boss we are going to face, the Dragonfly. The Dragonfly in Uncompromising Mode drops 3 scales instead of 1, and every item that can be crafted using scales is very good in this version of the game. However, there's just one problem. The Dragonfly has 110,000 health, which is more than even Misery Toadstool has in the base game. This is a very daunting number, and clearly we're gonna have to prepare. The first thing I'm gonna do is gather all the materials to craft all the clock items I need. Everything Wanda uses requires timepieces to make, which takes up 8 dual-site fragments each. This means we need a lot of fragments, so it's time we take a trip to the archives and start looting the place. This should be good enough for a while, so let's head back up to base and see what the others have been up to. This is Paper, and he's on a mission to tame himself an ordinary beefalo. The ordinary beefalo will be very valuable during this run, as it is essentially a weapon with infinite durability. Plus, it also serves as a health pool that isn't limited by Warley's repeat dish penalty. However, in Uncompromising Mode, you take half the damage your beefalo does, so it doesn't completely protect you. He's gonna be busy with this for a while, so we'll check back on him later. In the meantime, let's see what Dizzy's up to. While the rest of us are collecting the resources our characters need, he's setting up the farms that will sustain us for the entirety of the run. He's also taking advantage of a very special fruit that can only be found within the Hooded Forest. These are boomberries, and they can only be harvested with a shovel. If you choose to collect boomberries, you will have to be very cautious, as walking too close to them will cause them to explode. Although you can dig it up just fast enough to prevent this, you will need to position yourself very carefully if you want to keep its neighbors from exploding instead. Boomberries are used to make a very nice dish called the boomberry pancake, which is very similar to bacon and eggs. The only difference being that the health and sanity values are swapped. Other than that, boomberries are also an ingredient for a very powerful combat-oriented crockpot dish, which we will be making use of later. Anyways, back to me. I've gotten all the thulecite fragments I need, so all that's left for me to do is create a shadow manipulator so I can get my hands on Wanda's favorite weapon, the alarming clock. We were still missing the purple gem and nightmare fuel, so I started digging up as many graves as I could, but I also went on a side quest for pig houses because we could really use a pig farm later on. It was a little challenging to do, especially because the pigs in will fight back if you try to destroy their homes. I eventually got what I came for though. So now it's time to get some nightmare fuel. Now that we are fighting shadow creatures, I'd say this is the perfect opportunity for me to talk about one of Wanda's several nerfs in Uncompromising Mode. That being the damage vulnerability to shadows. Wanda takes 25% more damage from all shadow aligned enemies, which is quite detrimental to us because old Wanda already has a very low health pool. This is also problematic because Uncompromising Mode makes Insanity a bigger threat due to the new types of shadow creatures that can spawn. We can talk about them later though. Right now, let's focus on getting our weapon. Sheesh, that was a bit more dangerous than I expected it to be. Both my spear and helmet broke during that, but at least we didn't die. Anyways, we've finally gotten enough fuel to make our alarming clock, which means we have completed our preparations for the upcoming dragonfly fight. Now all we have to do is wait for the others to get ready. I will establish my pig farm and farm some nightmare fuel in the meantime. I'm using the nightmare amulet because in nightmare creatures spawned by the amulet drop 1 to 2 extra pieces of nightmare fuel, allowing us to stock up on fuel very easily. One more thing before we move on, let's quickly talk about the alarming clock. This weapon is absurdly powerful in the base game, given the insane amount of damage it deals, along with the attack range and refuelability. However, we are playing Uncompromising Mode, which means we simply can't have overpowered things. In the mod, this weapon is heavily nerfed, making it always do less damage than a dark sword. Feel free to take a second to pause if you need to. Despite these nerfs though, I'm still going to use this weapon for most of the challenge, because the attack range can help me fight from a safe distance, and the refuelability makes this a cheap weapon option. Anyways, the last resource we will be needing for this upcoming fight is pigskin, so while I'm farming it in the background, let's catch up on everyone else. Sodis has been very busy, gathering rocks, finding cache boxes, and collecting scrap in order to get Winona's buildings online. Winona's catapults will be extremely handy to have for many of the boss fights we will be up against, since they provide tons of much needed damage so long as we keep them from being destroyed. Paper has spent his time exploring the entire map while also getting progress on fully taming his beefalo. Meanwhile, Dizzy has worked on setting up the base and farming resources. Thanks to his farming skills, we now had a surplus of different crops available. Most notably would be the pepper plants, which can be turned into chili flakes by Warley, increasing the damage of any player who eats it by 20%. But the damage boosts don't stop there, because with a Volt Goat horn and some honey, we can add another 50% damage multiplier into the mix using Warley's Volt Goat jelly. The only issue with this recipe is that Volt Goat horns are hard to come by, but luckily for us, Uncompromising Mode helps us with that. In the mod, every Volt Goat herd has a single alpha goat, which is a much stronger variant of the regular Volt Goat. What's nice about the alpha goat is that it is guaranteed to drop a horn when killed, making it much easier to farm the resource. Unfortunately for us though, we only have a single Volt Goat horn to work with, which means that I will have to be the only one to get a Volt Goat jelly for this fight. I'm not too worried about it though, because I'm sure we can beat the Dragonfly without having everyone fully buffed up. Anyways, without further ado, let's head over to our first boss fight. And just like that, we have defeated the first of many bosses. We still have many more to go, and unfortunately for us, they won't be nearly as easy as the Dragonfly was. We chose to do the Dragonfly first because it is a single target boss with 0 area of effect attacks, but more importantly, it was also the only one in the game with a stun mechanic triggered by a high amount of incoming damage, which is very good for us because although the health of the boss is scaled up, all other factors remain the same. Anyways, with 110,000 health, the boss took us exactly 297 seconds to kill, giving us an effective DPS of 370. I really wonder how far we can push this number by the time we take on the largest boss of them all, Misery Toadstool. Having almost 400,000 health, I am not looking forward to fighting it. At least we won't have to for a while. Plus, we have much more pressing matters to worry about because winter is about to start. Winter in Uncompromising Mode is way harsher because it is nearly impossible to set things on fire. Thermal stones are basically useless on their own, and we will also have blizzards to deal with every couple of days. Fortunately for us, we've already managed to collect winter clothing for everyone to wear, and with the Dragonfly taken down, we also have a free source of heating coming from the scaled furnace. With only a few days remaining in autumn, Dizzy decided to quickly make a run for the ruins, in hopes of getting us star color staves to combat the upcoming winter even more. The ruins of Uncompromising Mode are far deadlier than vanilla, and with winter right around the corner, he won't be able to loot very much. He managed to scrape together several gems, and with the thulecite we got from the archives, he was able to repair a pseudoscience station and craft us some staves and amulets, one of which is newly added by Uncompromising Mode. This is the Ancient Soul Amulet, and it can be haunted to revive players, similar to how the life-giving amulet works in vanilla. This item exists because in Uncompromising Mode, the life-giving amulet is no longer able to revive players when haunted, making it a bit more expensive to bring people back to life. This item will be very nice to have, just in case something happens to go terribly wrong later on. Let's hope that doesn't happen though. Anyways, welcome back to my POV. Winter is about to start, which means our current objective is to go walrus hunting. Not only do we need to collect walking canes for everyone, but we also need extra tusks to make Wanda's greatest item ever, the backtrek watch. The more tusks we can gather, the better. And luckily for us, this world has a triple magtusk biome, meaning we can farm 4 of them every 3 days. So let's get started. That gave us 2 tusks, but we need more. Let's do some cave exploration while we wait for the magtusks to respawn. It's day 24, which means that we are about to experience our first snowstorm. The snowstorms in Uncompromising Mode reduce the movement speed and field of view of any players caught in it, unless you happen to be standing near a campfire, dwarf star, or had some kind of goggles on. They also reduce the temperature of the world, but besides that, there is also one more consequence to being in a snowstorm: snow piles. Snow piles will quickly build up on structures around you, making them completely unusable until the pile of snow is removed. The good news is that there are several ways to combat this mechanic. For one, snow piles can be dug up with a shovel, but an even better method than that would be to make use of scaled flooring, because anything built on scaled flooring is immune to snow pile buildup, which is yet another reason why killing the Dragonfly first was so helpful. Anyways, now that the snowstorm is over, we now have a 3-day grace period before the next one, which means that it's time to take on our second boss of the run, and we've decided on going for the Hooded Widow, one of the 4 new bosses added by Uncompromising Mode, and it is also the easiest. However, both Paper and Sodies will be busy with their own adventures during this time, which means that Dizzy and I will have to fight it 2 versus 1, which means that we both need to do roughly twice the amount of damage normally needed to take down the boss. Anyways, without further ado, let's get started. That's 2 bosses down, leaving only 25 more to go. The biggest challenge the Hooded Widow posed for us was her massive insanity aura of 400 per minute. Because of that, I was wearing the Dapper vest throughout the entire fight, because in Uncompromising Mode, the vest gives the player a 60% sanity aura resistance. Pair that with the alarming clock, and I'm able to keep a safe distance from the boss, further reducing the effects of the sanity aura. Now you might be wondering, why did we even fight this guy? Well, the Hooded Widow drops an item called the Widow's Claw, which is the only weapon in the game capable of breaking open these silky cocoons. Silky cocoons contain various other mobs from the constant, meaning they can drop a wide variety of items, and you can tell what they will be based off of the name. We fought the boss because one of the cocoons was a tier 2 leathery, which meant that it had a Mac Tusk inside. Since I need walrus tusks to create backtrack watches, this was a very good cocoon to go for. Unfortunately for us, however, these cocoons actually reset every 5 days, and this actually happened mid-fight, which means that the cocoon we wanted was no longer there. It's not really the end of the world though, we'll just use the claw later. Anyways, let's continue where we left off. Looks like Deerclops is spawning. It may seem like he's spawning earlier than he should be, since it's day 28 and Deerclops is known to always show up on day 30. However, in Uncompromising Mode, the first Deerclops always shows up on day 28, which also happens to be during a snowstorm, which would have been very inconvenient for us had we not been prepared. Another thing to note about the Deerclops in Uncompromising Mode is that there are actually 3 variants of the boss, with each one having its own unique attacks. It's also completely random which one spawns during the winter, so there's no telling which one it's gonna be. In this case, we got the simplest variant, Laserclops. This one is basically just a Winter's Feast Deerclops, which has a secondary attack where it fires off a laser. With the highest health config settings, this boss has a health pool of 16,000, which also happens to be the lowest amount any of the future bosses will have in this video. So this fight should be easy. Even with 4 times health, Deerclops really doesn't do that much. Anyways, the next boss on our list is Klaus, because he has a very special Uncompromising Mode exclusive drop that we will be needing for several fights later down the line. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Until then, we still have a few miscellaneous tasks left to do, so let's get started right away. Everyone's finally ready to fight Klaus. Besides having quadrupled health, this boss is mostly unchanged in Uncompromising Mode. The keyword here is mostly, because the spells from Klaus's Deer are much more impactful in this mod, because damage taken from freezing or overheating will also chip away at your max health as well. This doesn't really affect Wanda. However, the damage taken from the elements is very impactful against me, since the damage bypasses armor, and I don't have a lot of health to work with in old age. This means that I'll have to play the fight much more carefully. Well, it looks like I wasn't nearly as careful as I should have been. It's a good thing Sodis came prepared and brought some Telltale Hearts with him. Getting resurrected usually results in a max health penalty, but because I'm Wanda, that won't happen to me. Still though, it's a shame that I already died so early on, but it is what it is. The Klaus fight ended shortly after, which means that now we have access to the special item I was talking about earlier, the Knot Lock. Now you might be wondering, what does this item do and why do we want it for future boss fights? Well, I'm not telling you, because we can't even use it yet. Instead, let's take a look at some of the other characters we've been playing with, since a lot of this video has been focused on my point of view so far. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that Winona features some brand new mechanics in Uncompromising Mode, so it's time we start talking about it. In the mod, Winona has several new mechanics revolving around electricity. Here's how it works. First off, Winona has a new craft called the Electrical Conversion Kit, which requires 4 scrap to make. This item is able to upgrade any single lantern or miner hat into an electrical version of itself, granting the item some new perks. Firstly, electrical items can only be refueled by a lightning rod or one of Winona's generators. However, this also means that light bulbs can't be used on them anymore. Secondly, these items can now be overcharged up to a total of 200%, which increases the light radius to be effectively double the original amount. This only happens while the item has more than 100% durability though, and it also drains twice as fast in this state. So realistically, they actually only have 150% of the original durability. Besides lanterns, there's also... oh my god, no way this idiot died again. Anyways, as I was saying, electrical lanterns aren't the only thing that Winona can overcharge, because she can also overcharge electrical weapons like the Morning Star, or even the Bug Zapper, which is a weapon added by Uncompromising Mode. Anyways, by overcharging these weapons, they gain some new perks, like the ability to stun enemies that aren't bosses, or even an extra damage boost against mechanical enemies. Not particularly strong against something like Klaus, but now that we are in spring, and everything in the world will be wet most of the time, this weapon will become extremely potent, since the damage of this weapon will be increased to 72 per hit. In addition to the electrical conversion kit, Winona also gains 2 extra crafts. The first is the energy cell, which is an alternate fuel source for electrical items that you can carry around in your inventory. Lastly, there's the contraption container, which I'm really surprised Clay hasn't added yet. Basically, it's a 3x4 container that can hold Winona's special items, along with useful miscellaneous resources like fuel for generators or loot from cache boxes. So yeah, that's Winona for you. Anyways, back to the original topic at hand. What is the Knot Lock and why do we want it? Well, the Knot Lock is something known as a cursed item, which can only be used by players afflicted with the Veteran's Curse. What is the Veteran's Curse? Well, it's something you can obtain by touching the melancholic skull that always spawns near the florid poster. Up until now, I haven't touched it, because the Veteran's Curse inflicts an additional 20% damage taken and 20% faster hunger drain onto the player, which doesn't sound too appealing since I'm playing a character that already has a pretty small amount of health to work with, at least in old age. However, I believe the extra risk is worth it for the ability to use the Knot Lock, which is a body slot item that can increase the DPS of the wearer by 50%. That number is no joke. It accomplishes this by doubling your attack speed, but reducing the damage of every secondary attack by 50%. This item is basically animation cancelling on steroids, so as the DPS of the team, I pretty much have to make use of it. Great, now that we have the curse, it's time to start the next boss fight, the Nightmare Werepig. This boss is really important to do because it will give us access to Dreadstone armor, one of the best pieces of armor that Wanda can have, since it is also raining in the caves. This will make the Nightmare Werepig's health pool of 40,000 much less intimidating, because our Spicy Volt Goat Jelly will be giving us a 3x damage boost against wet targets, rather than just a 1.8x multiplier. Also, since the Werepig is unchanged in Uncompromising Mode, the fight should be pretty straightforward, so let's get started. Really? A third death? That's not good. I don't know why I was being so careless with such little health, but at least I have a second chance watch on standby. This death is a major DPS loss for our team, because now the effects of the Volko jelly will be gone. Oh my god. Of all the bosses we have to fight, I did not expect Nightmare Werepig to be the one to cause so many casualties. Since I had to revive myself with the second chance watch, the item broke, so it looks like we're gonna have to fight on without paper. Wonderful. That puts us at 5 bosses completed, and now I finally have access to Dreadstone armor. Now you might be wondering, what was that weird item that Dizzy was using throughout the fight? The one that kind of looks like Deerclops' antler. Well, that would be the Cursed Antler, one of 8 cursed items in the mod. That's right, I'm not the only one here who took on the curse. Dizzy had accepted it long before I did, so he can have access to the cursed item we got from Deerclops. This item is essentially an infinite spear with a special ability. Every 5 seconds, the cursed antler's next attack is enhanced, dealing 100 damage, along with 33 AoE damage as well. Unlike me, Dizzy is a huge cursed antler enjoyer, so he will be using this item quite a lot during this run. We will be seeing some of the other cursed items later in the video, but we won't be able to cover them all. Anyways, after going back up to the surface, I was greeted by the Lord of the Fruit Flies, a mini-boss that spawns in farm plots. Despite being considered a mini-boss, the 4x health config covers it too, giving it a whopping 6,000 health instead of the original 1,500. This is because the health config settings cover mini-bosses too, which introduces some new difficulties in our day-to-day lives. For instance, trying to farm evergreen trees is a pain, because mirrored tree guards have health bars that rival many of the vanilla bosses of the game, and yet they still drop the same amount of loot. This issue becomes even worse when we factor in the amount of buffs tree guards receive in Uncompromising Mode. Right now, they are manageable, but it will become far worse once we reach higher day counts, and multiple tree guards will spawn at once. At least it won't be much of a problem for a while. Speaking of things with a lot of health, take a look at this one. This is the Mother Goose, a much stronger variant of the Moose Goose from Vanilla, and we're gonna fight it right now. When 2/3 of her health is gone, Mother Goose will rapidly spawn magic lightning all around us, making the fight a lot more dangerous if you aren't wearing any rain protection. For this reason, I brought a raincoat with me, since it would prevent me from getting stunned should I get hit. And that's another boss taken care of, putting us at 6. Since the spicy Volko jelly was still active, Dizzy and I decided to take on some local spider queens, since they were getting pretty close to our base. Afterwards, we all went our separate ways for a while. Sodies is working on getting Pearl's quests done, Paper is busy farming Bolt Goat Horns, Dizzy starts expanding our honey farm, and I begin working on decorating the base, which clearly makes me the most productive member of the team right now. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention, during the springtime of Uncompromising Mode, there's also a giant tornado traveling around the constant. The tornado is a massive hazard that sucks in items and players, and it is very difficult to avoid if it manages to sneak up on you.
Tyr, get on the boat! No way!
Luckily for us, the mod allows us to track the tornado's movements by using a rainometer. It seems like the tornado is on the oasis right now, and it looks like it's heading away from the base, so there's nothing to be alarmed about. Also, if you're caught within several screens length of distance from the tornado, you will experience heavy rain, indicated by the overlay you see at the top of my screen. Unlike regular rain, heavy rain requires 150% wetness protection to stay dry from, which means you're forced to wear multiple pieces of protective clothing if you don't want to get wet. There will also be a high frequency of magic lightning all around, making it very unsafe to stay within the bounds of the storm. For the first spring, the tornado didn't really cause any problems for us, since it was mostly out of the way for everything we've been doing. Let's hope it stays that way in the future. And that's pretty much everything that happened during the first spring, which means it's now summertime. Me and the others have a long list of tasks we'd like to accomplish during this season, and it all starts with Antlion. While the Antlion fight isn't changed in Uncompromising Mode, the Lazy Deserter is, and it is really good and useful. Before we fought him though, we spent a few days doing miscellaneous tasks so that Dizzy could spend time fishing for special turfs, as well as that one other item that no one uses. But once he was done, 3 of us came over to fight Antlion. Let's hope it goes well. That fight wasn't too bad, but I am surprised at how both me and Dizzy almost got killed. I pretty much had no choice but to escape from the fight with my backtrack watch, since I feel like I've already had more than enough deaths in this video.
2 seconds later.
Okay, look. I don't play Wanda very often, and sometimes I kind of forget that I actually need to pay attention to my age, since I'm always getting older. Let's just hope this doesn't happen again, especially because one of the most dangerous bosses of Uncompromising Mode is coming to visit us today. This is a boss with a high amount of damage, nearly unkiteable, with its only weakness being a low max health of 4,000. However, since every boss's health pool is quadrupled, it will be increased to 16,000, which means that it will take all 4 of us to beat it. Here she comes. This is the Wilting Dragonfly, the seasonal boss for summer. It's similar to the Dragonfly from Solo Don't Starve, but with some key differences you're about to see. Going into this challenge, this was one of the few bosses that genuinely scared us, but it was good that we came prepared and that we could juggle its aggro to give each other time to heal up between attacks. We also made sure to acquire Scale Mail for Dizzy, since Wormwood's fire damage vulnerability is way worse in Uncompromising Mode. We then decided to start the Eye of Terror boss fight, since it was still nighttime and everyone was already here. However, we weren't quite able to get through it in a single night, and then we forgot to finish it the very next night. Anyways, now that the summer bosses are out of the way, it's time for everyone to part ways yet again. Paper will search for and assemble the shadow pieces in preparation for the new moon on day 81, getting us closer to fighting the final boss of the caves. Sodis will be setting sail into the ocean with his little battleship in hopes of discovering all ocean-related content for us. Dizzy will be busy farming Volt Goat horns, as well as setting up a fake farm far away from our base in hopes of getting the Lord of the Fruit Flies to spawn at it. Since the Lord of the Fruit Flies cannot appear in multiple locations, getting it to spawn away from our base will prevent it from being the nuisance that it is. And finally, there's me. Up until now, there has been a certain task that we've been putting off for quite some time, and I'm finally ready to take it on. Today, we will be clearing out the ruins of Uncompromising Mode. Although the ruins can already be life-threatening in vanilla, Uncompromising Mode takes that danger and doubles it with the addition of many brand new enemies. What kind of new enemies, you might ask? Well, let's go in and see them for ourselves. Firstly, we have pawns, which are commonly found at the entrance to the ruins. Walking up too close to these guys will activate them, creating a cage around you and summoning clockwork amalgamations. The pawns, as well as any clockwork spawned by them, do not drop any loot, so we will be avoiding them to the best of our ability. You might think it's strange that we are overheating in the caves, but this is perfectly normal in Uncompromising Mode. While the caves aren't as hot as the surface, they are still hot enough to overheat in during the summer. Therefore, I brought several items along with me into the ruins to help me combat the environment. Whenever I overheat, I'll use the luxury fan I brought to cool myself off. And also, yes, this isn't a backpack skin, it's the Summer Frest, which is buffed in Uncompromising Mode to also function as a backpack, but with less inventory slots. This way, I can have summer insulation without having to sacrifice a ton of inventory space. This is the Depth Viper, one of the 2 Depthworm variants added by Uncompromising Mode. This variant typically spawns during the Depthworm attacks of summer and autumn, and it is noticeably harder to kill. This is because the Depth Viper constantly spawns little viperlings to fight alongside it, making it trickier to safely kite it. Instead of glowberries, Depth Vipers drop gloomberries, a valuable fruit that can be used to increase a player's DPS. Now that the ruins has been cleared, it's time for me to set up a backcheck watch down there so that I can bring everyone over to help me fight the Ancient Guardian. Before we do that though, I should probably explain what this orange color is at the top of my screen, as well as the other changes Uncompromising Mode brings to summer. So, the orange tint indicates that a heat wave is currently happening, which increases the temperature of the world and causes wildfires to happen extremely frequently. On the upside though, wildfires will never actually happen outside of heat waves, and they also will never target buildings, which is why you'll notice that we haven't built any ice flingamatics near certain parts of the base. This makes the summers of Uncompromising Mode much more bearable when it comes to base building, but it isn't entirely sunshine and rainbows, because fires can emit a lot of smog during the summer, which creates a damaging zone that chips away at the player's max health. There are multiple ways to fight back against smog, but the best way would definitely be to just try and avoid it. Anyways, that's enough yapping. It's time to bring everyone over to the ruins so we can fight the Ancient Guardian together. We now have all the marble pieces assembled, the atrium discovered, the fossils collected, and the Ancient Guardian waiting for us to take his key from him. So all that's left for us to do is get to the boss fight. Oh shit, never mind. We need to defend our base first. These rats are after our items, and we need to stop them quickly. Seems like that's the end of the raid. I have a bad feeling that some of them got away, and if they did, that means they'll start creating rat dens out in the wild and begin multiplying over and over again until we go out there and put a stop to it. When the world is plagued with rats, the chances of getting a rat raid increases, so this isn't a problem that we can ignore forever. Anyways, after a bunch of base building, we finally got ourselves ready to teleport over to the ruins. Okay, hold on. I need to explain something here. So basically, when the Ancient Guardian is low on health, he vomits out a Shadow Heart, which keeps him completely invincible until the heart is destroyed. Normally, this heart is very easy to kill, as you just need to hit it a single time. However, during this session you're watching right now, this heart was entirely untargetable due to a bug, making it impossible to damage it or the boss. Because of this, we then decided to abandon the fight and come back later when the bug was fixed. This bug got fixed the very next day, so I teleported back to the ruins on my own to finish the job. Great, now that that fight is out of the way, let's get back to where we were. Looks like Bearger is spawning. Although we'd love to use him to farm logs, it's a lot riskier in Uncompromising mode because the Bearger has been substantially buffed, making it much more dangerous to do. Instead, we'll just fight him in our little arena. That fight took quite a while, but I guess that's expected when half of the group is preoccupied with other tasks. Paper and I took 242 seconds to kill Bearger, resulting in a DPS of 99, which is definitely not as good as it could have been. Anyways, the next boss on our list is the Shadow Pieces, since day 81 is quickly approaching. In the meantime, Sodis has assembled the Celestial Altar and began hunting for the Celestial Sanctum Pieces too. I also decided to build a Qualiphant pen, because I think they look cool. Anyways, that's enough stalling. Let's get started with the Shadow Pieces fight. Whoa, that is some crazy timing. What you're witnessing right now is a random night event, which is a common occurrence in Uncompromising mode, but also something that I haven't really showcased so far in the video. To keep things short, random night events happen to the player every now and then, where something strange visits the player and sticks around until the sun comes up. There are many different types of night terrors, and it seems like we are witnessing two of them happen at the same time. One of these events is the Woven Shadow Horde, which seems to be targeting Paper. These guys are harmless, but they do drain sanity quite fast. The other event is the Shadow Arena, which is an optional boss fight with a special prize, and it looks like Dizzy wants to accept it. We plan on fighting the pieces in the order of Knight, Bishop, and Rook, since the tier 3 Rook is easy to kite, and the Knight becomes horrendous to fight the more it levels up. As for the Bishop, its attack has been reworked in Uncompromising Mode to be more aggressive, but also kiteable. That was a pretty standard Shadow Pieces fight, but it's crazy to see how close I was to dying from getting hit just a single time. The Shadow Rook hits pretty hard at tier 3, especially because I have the Veteran's Curse and Wanda's damage vulnerability to add on top of it. By the way, if you're wondering what happened to Dizzy, he got teleported to the Oasis Desert by the Night Terror. The thing about Night Terrors is that they always disappear in the mornings, and since we have the health of every boss quadrupled, he was up against a Shadow Rook with 16,000 health and less than a minute to kill it. Needless to say, the boss despawned long before he came close to killing it, so he had to run all the way back to the group and help us with the fight. Anyways, with the Shadow Pieces defeated, we decided to call it a night since we were all feeling pretty tired. Up to this point, everything in the run has been going very smoothly. Sure, we've had a handful of deaths, as well as that Ancient Guardian bug, but other than that, pretty much everything has been going according to plan. Little did we know that things weren't going to be so easy moving forward. When we rejoined the server the next day and walked back to base, everything seemed normal, except it wasn't. Why is the Eye of Terror here? We fought it like 20 nights ago, so it should have been reset by now. But also, why is it here? No one even spawned it in the first place. Whatever, I guess we'll take the free boss fight. Huh? Isn't he supposed to fly away during the daytime? What kind of black magic is going on here? I'm at a loss for words, but at least that gets the Eye of Terror out of the way. That segment was pretty cursed, but let's just put it behind us and forget about it. Instead, let's focus on the future and talk about the next boss fight we're planning to take on, the Crab King. The Crab King is the only thing left standing between us and the Celestial Champion boss fights, so we definitely want to do him next. The Crab King is completely unchanged in Uncompromising Mode, but I wonder what the fight is like with 4 times health modifiers. I guess there's only one way to find out. Okay, what the hell was that? Why in the world did the ice platform break after like 3 seconds? I've never seen anything like it before, but at least Dizzy and Sodies are still able to fight, so let's wish them luck. Well, that sucks. I don't really know why Crab King was doing that, but if I had to guess, it must have something to do with his health modifiers, although I can't really understand why that would cause the ice to break early. That was quite a loss for us, but especially for Sodies, since his catapults got destroyed and rocks aren't exactly able to float on water. We spent some time recovering, 10 whole days in fact. During this period of time, we didn't accomplish too much, but this is also around the time that I went down to finish off the Ancient Guardian. Sodies also managed to replenish his supply of rocks, but other than that, we didn't do anything noteworthy, so let's skip ahead to the next Crab King fight. Since we will be fighting during winter this time, we made sure to bring Starcaller staves and insulated clothing to protect us from freezing, and we will also tread on the ice much more carefully now that we've learned how it works. Here goes nothing. My god, there's no way we lost to this boss again. We were too focused on the ice platforms to notice the cannon tower poking through our boat, and now we are back to square one. Frankly, the Crab King wasn't among the bosses we expected to be struggling against, but I guess that's just where we are right now. We are feeling pretty demoralized from that, but maybe a quick Klaus kill could help bring our morale back up. Since winter is ending in a handful of days, we wanted to fight him again because it would be pretty cool to get a Krampus sack right now. What we didn't realize at the time was that we were about to get ourselves into one of the most intense boss fights of the entire run. I honestly have no words to describe what's about to go down, so instead, I made a little montage on it. Enjoy. That fight was so much fun. Once we realized Deerclops was coming, we had to make sure someone was keeping him occupied at all times because we couldn't risk letting any of the deer die. Having abominamals and hounds show up during the fight also made it much more chaotic, but at least we were able to pull through with only 2 casualties. Anyways, now that that is out of the way, it's time for us to prepare ourselves yet again for the Crab King fight. Since we've already failed to beat this boss 2 times, we'll have to be extra careful with our next attempt, because losing to it a 3rd time would just be embarrassing. A lot of things happened during our preparations, so I'll quickly go over them. Firstly, I died. Again. But besides that, I also farmed some Mac Tusks, then died. Then I challenged Goose with Sodies once springtime came around. This time, I didn't die, but neither did the Goose, because after almost 7 minutes of fighting her, she decided to fly away for seemingly no reason. Great. Anyways, Sodies spent the time mining tons of rocks to replace the catapults he's lost so far, and Dizzy started building an automatic Volt Goat farm, since it would produce the key resource needed to make our boss fights much easier. And that's about it. Nothing else worth talking about really happened over that 9-day period, so instead, let's discuss our plan to defeat Crab King. We'll be fighting the Crab King the exact same way as the last 2 times, but this time, we have a significant advantage. The world is wet. Thanks to the rain and spring, the damage boost from our Volgo Jelly will be greatly magnified, allowing us to deal triple our base damage. We will also be very cautious of both the cannon towers and the ice floor, since they were the reasons we've lost the previous 2 times. Anyways, with all that being said, here goes nothing. Let's go. We finally got our revenge on the Crab King, and we did so in just 92 seconds, resulting in our highest DPS so far of 521. This number is quite impressive, especially when considering the amount of time spent on the water, but I'd say we have Warley's buffs to thank for that. Speaking of Warley, I haven't really had a chance to talk about him too much, so it's about time we discuss how he's been changed in Uncompromising Mode. Firstly, his chef pouch has been reworked to behave similarly to the polar Bearger bin. Instead of working like a backpack, the chef pouch can now store 6 foods inside it, while also slightly reducing their spoilage time. The neat thing about the chef pouch is that it can be shared with other players, which is why you might have noticed it sitting in our inventories for quite some time. But the chef pouch isn't the only thing that Warley can share, because now his portable crockpot can also be used by others, which I'm sure you've noticed by now with our kitchen setup. As for Warley himself, he also gains a massive stat increase of 20% from crockpot dishes he hasn't eaten in 3 days, making sanity and health foods much more powerful on him. This does come at the cost of a higher repeat dish penalty, but I would argue that this is well worth the trade-off. Lastly, he also gains some new butchering skills, allowing him to gain more resources through murdering animals. You can do this with bunnies and spiders, but it's most effective with fish. Whoa. Sodies did not waste much time enabling the moonstorms. Just to clarify, we aren't actually in a hurry to fight the Celestial Champion. He mostly did this so that every night would become a full moon, and we wouldn't need to care about the darkness on the surface. But this decision does come with another consequence that we will be seeing in a little while. But until that happens, Dizzy and I decided that we wanted to take advantage of the wetness of the world and eliminate more bosses from the list. And what better boss to go for next than the Scrappy Werepig? The Scrappy Werepig fight is unchanged in Uncompromising Mode, so with the roads that Dizzy brought with him, this fight shouldn't be too difficult. So let's get started. That wasn't too bad. We did get beat up quite a bit there, but thanks to the damage resistance we got from Warley's garlic powder, we were able to survive it. We ended up killing the Scrappy Werepig so fast that our Volko jelly was still active, so when we bumped into the Moose Goose shortly after, we were able to defeat her very quickly as well. With the Moose Goose taken down, that leaves us with only 12 bosses left to go through. But it also begs the question, which boss are we going to go for next? It won't be either of the endgame bosses, since we want to save them for later, which also means we can eliminate the mutated bosses as well. We could do the Twins of Terror next, but we'd rather wait for the winter to come around for the longer nights. And that leaves us with either Toadstool, Bee Queen, or an Ocean boss. I kinda wanted to fight the Ocean bosses next, but the group wasn't too interested, so instead, we've decided to go for the Bee Queen next, since she would be the perfect boss to fight during the springtime. This is because the Bee Queen is greatly reworked in Uncompromising Mode, and she is now one of the few bosses that actually becomes more challenging when multiple players are involved. Pair that with the 4x health modifiers, and we've got a very difficult boss fight on our hands, so the massive damage boost from wetness is very important to have here. Whoa, it looks like I've died again. Let's take a quick second to guess what it is that got me killed this time. Was it A, a terror beak, B, lightning, or C, natural causes because I forgot to check my age again? If you picked, I got bored so I tried to solo Albatross, but then a pirate raid happened and it distracted me from my health bar, then you'd be correct. It was a very dumb thing to do, but I also got really lucky because Albatross fought off all the monkeys and defended my loot. Anyways, let's spend some time recovering from whatever this was and begin preparing for the Bee Queen fight. I sure do keep dying a lot, but I hope that doesn't happen during the Bee Queen fight. Unfortunately for us, everything about this boss has been changed, and let's just say that her damage output has gotten noticeably greater. But that's enough for me. Let's get this fight started. That fight wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was gonna be. Unlike vanilla, the Bee Queen in UM emphasizes dodging the bees and positioning yourself well so that you have space left to move in that isn't covered by honey. But this becomes more difficult in multiplayer because she ends up sending way more bees than normal. That being said, since we prepared a massive arena and brought spicy Voltcoat jelly while the Bee Queen was wet, we were able to cut down on the difficulty just enough to pull through with only 2 deaths. Speaking of deaths, I've died so many times at this point that I've honestly lost count, and the worst part is that you haven't even seen every single one up until this point. Not only that, but dying as Wanda is technically more expensive than it is on other characters because of one simple reason. Wanda does not leave a skeleton behind on death. You might be wondering, why does this matter? Well, in Uncompromising mode, every skeleton in the game drops 1 long pig when hammered, which also happens to be the key ingredient required to make telltale hearts. I'm sure you can see the problem here. Every time a telltale heart is used to revive me, the number of hearts that can be made in the world is reduced by 1, and we've now reached the point where we are basically out of them. There are other methods too, but I've already exhausted all of the touchstones, and the second chance watch costs 3 time pieces instead of 1, which means it uses up Thulecite when used to revive me. So that leaves only one other option if we pretend like meat effigies don't exist: the Ancient Soul Amulet, aka a life-giving amulet made with Thulecite. Dizzy was kind enough to give me the one he's been holding on to for the entire run, so I quickly teleported into the ruins to craft us some more. We will be needing these around, especially because summer is just 1 day away, and there's a very special Uncompromising Mode exclusive boss waiting to come for us. And that's it right there, just on time. This is the Moonmaw Dragonfly, a boss that can only spawn on a full moon during summer. I don't really know why it's spawning during the daytime, but I guess that's just what it does when you mess with the moon cycle by activating the moonstorms. At this point, however, none of that really matters anymore, because we are about to fight the last and most dangerous boss added by Uncompromising Mode. Here goes nothing. It's too dangerous to attack him like this. We need to first destroy the glass lave. Wait a minute, I can outrange this attack. Wanda is kinda broken. Now that his crystals are down, he gains new attacks, but at least everyone can now hit him. It's hard to call that one a victory, because Paper lost the beefalo he's had since the very beginning of the run. As much as we'd like to roll back and undo the damage the Moonmaw has done, we unfortunately won't be able to, since it's against the rules. This means that Paper will have to tame a brand new beefalo completely from scratch, which is truly heartbreaking. On the bright side, with the Moonmaw taken out, we now have access to one of the most powerful body slot items added by Uncompromising Mode, which we will be able to use against the Toadstool. But first, we have a wide variety of miscellaneous tasks we want to deal with. For starters, we need to recover a bunch of our stolen items because we actually got raided by rats the night before Moonmaw showed up, which was some very bad timing for us. The rats took a bunch of our items and ran off in different directions, so we will have to hunt their locations down and get rid of them. With the rats out of the picture, we all went our separate ways for a while because we don't want to fight the Toadstool during the summer. Sodis has been interested in treasure hunting since the very beginning, so with the Crab King out of the way and a bunch of free time on his hands, he's going to be occupying himself on the ocean for a while. Since Paper lost his beloved Beefalo earlier, he will be taming a brand new one. Fortunately for him, he will have access to the brush to make the taming process a bit faster. This is the handheld hive, the cursed item dropped by Bee Queen. It's a ranged weapon capable of capturing bees and converting them into bullets that you can fire. The bees are very fragile, but they also have a pretty fast attack speed and are also the perfect counter to Antlion since she can't fight back. It's finally time for us to fight the Toadstool, and we've prepared a lot. We've also brought several Uncompromising Mode exclusive items to help us with this fight, most of which I haven't been able to cover up until this point, so I'll explain them throughout the fight. So without further ado, let's get started. The first new item we are using is the Plague Mask, a powerful head slot item that gives the wearer immunity from spore clouds and smog, allowing me to spend less time dodging and more time attacking. This is the second new item we are using, the Shard Scale Armor, which we acquired through killing the Moonmaw Dragonfly. This is a body slot item that spawns moon shards that orbits the user as they attack stuff, dealing damage with anything they come in contact with. This is an amazing armor to use as a DPS booster. However, it comes with the caveat that getting hit even a single time will instantly destroy all the moon shards you've accumulated, which is fine for a boss like Toadstool, since he's one of the easiest bosses to avoid getting hit from. And lastly, we have the Crab Claw, which is being used by Paper. This is the cursed weapon dropped by Crab King, and it has some of the most potential among all the other cursed items. The gimmick of this weapon is that it can be loaded up with gems, each of which grants the weapon more damage, as well as a unique on-hit effect depending on the gems used. This weapon also has perfect synergy with the Knot Lock, because not only does it greatly increase attack speed, but it also uses up 0 durability on each secondary attack, as well as apply on-hit effects as well, which literally doubles the amount of on-hit effects applied. However, these gems have a low durability, which really sucks for Paper, because it looks like he has already burned through his good ones. The loadout he used at the beginning of the fight essentially gave him a dual sight club with a 4 times higher likelihood of spawning a shadow tentacle with each hit, at least until the gems broke. Despite being the second tankiest boss in the game, that fight was actually really easy. With the Toadstool taken down, it's finally time for us to enter into the final phase of this playthrough, the end game. We've been putting it aside for quite some time, but we've now reached into the 3rd year of this run, so it's about time we quit stalling and begin activating the rifts. The first endgame boss we will be going for is the Celestial Champion because he is the gatekeeper to all of the mutated bosses, as well as the key resource needed for both Wormwood and Winona to reach their full potential. Fortunately for us, this will be really easy to do, as we've already activated the Moonstorms a while ago. All that's left for us to do is gather the materials needed and start the fight. Dizzy always builds the nicest looking arenas. Anyways, we've now gathered everyone and everything we need to take on the Celestial Champion, so without wasting any more time, let's get started. The Celestial Champion is unchanged in Uncompromising Mode, so the only thing we will have to worry about is his absurdly high health pool thanks to the config settings we are playing with. So, CC ended up sitting in this defensive stance for a while, for like an entire minute basically. I'm not sure if this is because of the health modifiers or an incoming damage thing, but he was wasting a pretty big chunk of our time because he just really liked sitting in that defensive stance. We eventually managed to kill him though, so it's on to phase 2. That fight went so well. Despite being the final boss of the game, we suffered no casualties at all, and now we can finally unleash the Lunar Rifts into the world. This means that in 5 days from now, the Lunar Rift will open, granting us access to endgame materials, as well as the 3 mutated bosses. A lot of the endgame content of Don't Starve is unchanged in Uncompromising Mode, so there's no need for me to talk about it too much, but there is one little thing that is worth discussing, and that is Winona's Calibrated Perceiver. This is an item available in vanilla, and it gives Winona the ability to learn the recipe of an item simply by scanning it. But wait, why would this be a problem, you might ask? Well, take a look at this. So, in Uncompromising Mode, you're actually able to craft Enlightened Shards, but you can't unlock the recipe for it unless you deconstruct an Enlightened Crown, or if you're playing Winona, of course. This item allows her to unlock the recipe without needing to sacrifice the Enlightened Crown, which is pretty strong, but honestly, I think the real issue here is how dirt cheap this recipe is. It definitely needs a hotfix nerf, because it is just straight up overpowered. But what can you do? It's in the game and we've used it. So now, Sodis has access to powerful planar catapults, as well as plenty of infinite generators to back them up. But that's not the only thing he'll be spending those shards on, because he's also got his eyes on the Warbus armor set, specifically the headgear, because it can provide a solid 20% damage boost for basically no cost at all. This is pretty valuable for boss fights. And speaking of boss fights, I'd say this is the perfect time for us to fight the Twins of Terror, because we are now back in winter where the nights are long, and we are still waiting for the rifts to grow before we can obtain planar gear for the other members. The Twins of Terror fight is pretty fun in Uncompromising Mode, because both the bosses received a new attack from the game they originated from. The Spasmatism can shoot cursed flames, and the Retinazer fires lasers now. The Twins of Terror drop a pretty good item, but since we are starting to establish ourselves in the endgame, it's not really needed. Anyways, after that fight, the Lunar Rift grew into its final phase, which meant that Pure Brilliance is now abundantly available. Likewise, we also started seeing deadly bright shades infest our crops, so now we can... As I was saying, we can now craft ourselves some bright shade items, which will come in really handy for the next time Deerclops shows up, which could be literally any time. After doing some waiting, we decided to go after Klaus once again, since we were still interested in Krampus sacks. We did this 2 days before winter ended, and you'll never believe what ends up happening. That's right, it's happening again. I swear to God, we aren't doing this on purpose. That being said, while we could just abandon the Klaus fight and focus all our attention on the incoming Deerclops, what fun would that be? So instead, we're gonna split into 2 groups and deal with both bosses at the same time. Oh yeah, I should probably explain that. This is another one of Deerclops' variants, Auraclops. Although this variant has less health, he has the most disruptive ability among all the other variants. We did it! We beat our first mutated boss, and we did it with no, well, 1 casualty. That only leaves 2 more to go, alongside the other bosses we need to eliminate. However, if we want to be taking on the other 2 anytime soon, then we better get some planar gear for Paper and I. And I'm not talking about bright shade items, because we are a bit more interested in the items that come from a slightly different type of rift, the Shadow Rifts. To unleash the Shadow Rifts, we must first kill the Ancient Fuelweaver, one of, if not the most difficult boss in Don't Starve Together, at least when playing by yourself. But we're not playing by ourselves, so how will the fight go with multiple people? And how will the 4 times health modifiers impact such a demanding fight? I guess you'll be finding that out pretty soon, because we'll be doing that right after we deal with this rat problem. At this point, I feel like I'd rather fight the Ancient Fuelweaver than a bunch of rats, so let's go do that instead. Fortunately for us, I set up a backtrack watch in Fuelweaver's arena a little while ago, so I can just teleport us all right away. I'm actually such an idiot. I didn't realize that time rifts last a really short amount of time, so I ended up missing it and had to walk all the way back while the others waited on me. On the bright side, this does give them plenty of time to set up. Sodies is setting up his planar catapults in the corners to help nuke the woven shadows, and Dizzy is setting up bramble traps all around the arena. For those of you who don't know, Wormwood's skill tree allows him to automatically reset bramble traps when bloomed, which means we'll have another great source of DPS. Okay, maybe just the catapults then. Oh look, I made it. I guess that means we can start the fight now. So let's get right into it. That was probably one of the easiest Fuelweaver fights I've ever had, but I can't really say I'm surprised. We came into this fight with a lot of very stacked gear, not to mention the rain paired with spicy Voltgo jelly tripled all of our base damage. The Fuelweaver fight also gets significantly easier when you have multiple people with you, because you can just delegate the tasks to a specific person, rather than have to do everything by yourself. In this case, I was able to focus on quickly taking down the Shadow Hands without having to worry about the boss healing itself, because I know that everyone else was dealing with the woven shadows. Anyways, with that milestone out of the way, we can finally offer the Dreadstone up to Charlie and activate the Shadow Rifts once and for all. With this having been completed, we also completely reset the ruins, so I'm gonna quickly clear it before their acid rain comes into play. And that was a pretty successful clearing of the ruins. And we even got out just in time to avoid the acid rain and plant our enemies. We've only got 3 serious boss fights remaining, that being the Possessed Varg, Armored Bearger, and worst of all, the Misery Toadstool. All 3 of these bosses are very formidable, with 2 of them being planar bosses with devastating attacks, and the other having close to 500,000 HP. As I mentioned earlier, I really want to get my hands on some void equipment before we take on these final bosses, which means I first need to defeat some ink blights. To do so, I decided to bring Paper along to help me out, because the ruins can be pretty dangerous when the rifts are active, especially in Uncompromising mode. We knew it wasn't going to be easy, but what we didn't realize at the time was that we were severely underprepared. What a disaster that was. After that incident, Paper didn't want to go anywhere near the ruins again, so it'll be completely up to me to recover his items and collect Dark Tathers. The problem is that 1. Post-rift caves are a complete nightmare in Uncomp, and 2. I have no idea how to fight Rictus. So with that being said, here's a short compilation of my attempts at getting Dark Tathers. Attempt number 1. I enter the ruins after a long struggle and recover Paper's items. Then, I make the special crafting station and start looking for the Dreadstone outcrop. No luck, so I leave the ruins and come back several days later. Attempt number 2. I encountered some of these things and got some pure horror to my name. Then I found a Dreadstone outcrop. Unfortunately for me, I didn't know anything about Rictus, so I didn't have any way of getting him out of that invisible state. Attempt number 3. Now I know that Rictus needs to be damaged first, so I brought some tooth traps as well as a shiny snap teeth, which is a throwable version of the trap that MacTusk uses in Uncomp. This ended up working pretty well, but unfortunately for me, I walked too close to a pond and things got out of hand. Attempt number 4. I decided that the ruins was too much, so I went for a wild Nightmare Light instead. I brought some Brightshade gear to help me out as well. I farmed a ton of easy pure horror from the Shadow Rift, and then took down the 3 Rictus as well. And there we have it, a bunch of pure horror and Dark Tathers. I immediately rushed to the surface and started crafting. And there we have it. Now that we finally have our late game items, it's about time we quit stalling and proceed to fight the next boss on our list, the Possessed Varg. To fight this boss, we'll need to follow a dangerous hunt, which is exactly what Dizzy has already been doing. So now it's time to bring him over to our arena and start the fight. That was a relatively short fight, but I guess that's expected when the boss only has 12,000 health. With the possessed Varg taken down, that leaves us with only a single mutated boss before we get our first Spark Arc, the Armored Bearger. He'll be next on our list of bosses to eliminate, and fortunately for us, he's actually been sitting on Lunar Island for nearly a year now because he spawned shortly before we fought the Celestial Champion. So all we really have to do is go pay him a visit. That being said, we didn't do so for a little while because everyone else was busy doing their own thing. Additionally, we also got visited by the Moonmaw Dragonfly, but we've already beaten her once, so who cares? Once everyone was finally ready, we teleported over to the Lunar Island to initiate the boss fight. Afterwards, we soon located the boss, and the fight began. Let's go. Now that the Armored Bearger has been taken down, we only have the Frostjaw, Malbatross, and Misery Toadstool left to go. Since this video is dragging on to be insanely long, I won't bore you too much with the filler details. The only notable thing that happened was that I went back into the ruins to grab Paper, a possessed Shadow Atrium, allowing him to craft the Nightmare Saddle for his Beefalo. We happen to have an extra Shadow Atrium lying around because we fought the Shadow Pieces a second time earlier during the spring. Once that was done, we all got in a boat together and headed off into the ocean one final time. Our first stop, Frostjaw's Island. After taking on all the hardest bosses of the game, we've managed to accumulate the most powerful tools and items available for our characters. So let's take a look and see how a Frostjaw with 4 times health does against all of that. And to no one's surprise, he really can't do that much. While we were out here, let's take a look and see if maybe the Malbatross will cause us some trouble. There happened to be a Malbatross spawner right next to Pearl's Island, and when we bootlegged there, we immediately found her, which was pretty lucky. Let's hurry up and get started right away. Yeah, I'll just come out and say it. Malbatross is really not that exciting. It's kind of funny to see how many feathers we ended up getting from her though, since she drops a feather each time she gets hit by something. Therefore, a Malbatross with increased health drops way more than normal. Anyways, with the Malbatross gone, we are finally down to the last and most dreadful boss fight in the game, the Misery Toadstool. This boss has a grand total of 400,000 health, and it is going to take everything we have to tear it down. Nothing too notable happens during our preparations for this fight, so I'll briefly talk about all the resources we are bringing to beat this guy. For starters, we are bringing a wide variety of healing, sanity, and damage boosting foods. The spicy Volko jelly will be boosting our physical damage by 80% because we don't feel like waiting around for the rain to start. In addition to the Volko jelly, we will also be utilizing Gloomberry jam, an Uncompromising Mode exclusive dish that I teased at the beginning of the video, but never actually ended up using. Sorry. This dish summons 6 Viperlings to fight alongside you. They deal 37.5 damage and last for about half a minute, which is pretty short, but it results in some pretty good damage. We would have used this item more, but it is kind of expensive and has a pretty short duration. In terms of equipment, I'll be utilizing the Nodlock to maximize my DPS with the Shadow Reaper. Earlier in the video, I said that this item doubles your attack speed, but it turns out that I was wrong. I would get into the technical details now, but I plan on making a separate video where I go into depth on this item, along with the other cursed items the mod has to offer, so I won't do that right now. Long story short, it barely increases DPS when using weapons that do physical damage, but it is actually effective when combined with planar weapons, because the planar damage is not reduced. Therefore, I will be utilizing the Shadow Reaper and Void Cowl alongside it. Paper will be making use of his newly acquired Nightmare Saddle paired with his Ornery Beefalo to output a massive and consistent DPS. To make his Beefalo setup even stronger, he is using the Shard Scale armor alongside it, as it works quite nicely with his Beefalo. He's also got a Plague Mask to allow him to fight inside Spore Clouds and spend more time attacking the boss. Dizzy will be using a Brightshade Sword and Brambleshade armor, as both of these items work very nicely with Wormwood's affinity skills. He is also using the Enlightened Crown to further increase his DPS even more. And as for Sodies, he set up planar catapults in all corners of the arena, granting him tons of easy damage. Due to the powerful nature of his catapults, he will be responsible for knocking down Toadstool Spore Caps as soon as they come up, allowing the rest of us to focus all our attention on the boss. For weapons and armor, he's going to be sticking to his favorite items. And that's about it for preparations. In summary, we prepared a lot, and we are ready. Without further ado, let's get started with our final battle. Oh man, that's not good. Are you Damn, bro, I died 3 times in this one fight alone.
Because you don't value
Jesus Christ.
life.
You don't die, you run out of time.
Guess not. Also, I get one shot by everything, so. Well, with the Misery Toadstool taken down, we have finally reached the end of this playthrough. With the video coming to a close, I really want to say thank you to everyone who has watched up until this point. You guys are awesome. I also want to say thank you to these 3 amazing individuals for agreeing to help me film this video. I had such a fun time playing with them. Paper and Dizzy don't really have anything for me to shout out, but Sodies on the other hand has a YouTube channel and he's nearly done with his video on this playthrough. You guys should totally check him out. I've seen what he's been working on and it's pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. Another name I want to throw out there is Fabin, who, if you don't know, drops tons of high quality synth remakes of many of Clay's soundtracks. They're pretty good and I had to use a couple of them in this video. Thank you to Fabin for letting me use his songs freely. Anyways, this game mode was really fun and I highly recommend you all give it a try with your friends. With all that being said, goodbye for now. I'm not sure when the next video will be out, but I'll be back sometime eventually. Bye bye.